Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're at. Hello, my name is Cindy McDonald, and we are launching our new series of professional development for Guided Path today. And I'm so grateful to have as our guest Maria Furtado from Colleges That Change Lives. What Guided Path has decided to do this year is, instead of doing webinars, we're going to do subject matter expert interviews. And our topic this year is on different paths to education. Our students all have a different way of coming, and we as counselors, advisors, whether you're at a school, a nonprofit group, working as an independent, helping students to find their paths. And I think it's very appropriate that we start this year talking about that with all, talk from a liberal arts perspective and the value, especially working with the students and the questions that they have about this. So welcome, Maria. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate being asked back, and I'm kind of excited to be the first in your new series.
Well, we really appreciate your time, and I know you're traveling all over the country sharing the news and the message about liberal arts. Now, we know this generation, and I just finished the book on Generation Z and what they're looking for. We know they're different from previous generations. In what ways are you and the colleges that you work with, how are they seeing these differences in Generation Z? How are they different from previous generations?
Given that they're more connected to each other, but in different ways, I think the colleges are working with faculty and with the staff to make sure that we are finding them in the place that they need to be and giving them the information that they need in the place where they're looking for information, but at the same time, not sacrificing the old-fashioned connection, person to person, in person, because that's one of the hallmarks of a liberal arts college, is that really the faculty and the student interaction is very personal, very intimate in an intellectual way. And we don't want them to be too comfortable staying on their screens. I mean, they're screen-oriented. They are spending more and more time looking at phones and looking at iPads and looking at computers. But the hallmark of a liberal arts college is asking them to step away from some of their comfort zone, whether it's intellectually or personally, so that they can grow and understand how to work with different people. Gen Z is going to be very comfortable with interacting amongst themselves in that way, but they're not only going to interact in the world, in the work world, the employment world, with people who are Gen Z. And their supervisors are going to be from Gen X and Gen Y, and sometimes really old people like me who are from a whole nother set of priorities and ways of doing things. And for them to understand that, they'll be better employees, they'll be better doctors and lawyers and graduate students.
So they're not going to be able to text their questions and messages to their coworker in the other room, huh?
You know, oddly, they probably will in some places. I know that I have a colleague whose office downloaded a program called Slack, and they do an immense amount of work back and forth through this program, Slack. And it's really like a chat room almost, not a weird chat room, but just kind of a chat program. And they get an awful lot done because they all feel like they don't have to get up and actually go ask as many questions. But I know that there's still such a benefit as a person, but there's a benefit as a worker, as an employee, as a boss, in being able to sit and look somebody in the eye and have conversation. Especially, having been a supervisor, especially when it comes to things like having to do reviews, understanding how to really see how people are responding to the feedback you're trying to give. Some of that comes from having that experience of doing things in person. Mm-hmm. And employers are very impressed when a person can communicate in writing when it takes more than 140 characters.
Right, right. Well, and I think that's why programs like what we use for these interviews and doing, having Zoom or video chat or FaceTime
Hmm.
are so popular and proliferating, because it gives you that personal touch without having to be in the same physical location. But that is definitely the generation. I mean, they all have grown up with cell phones and all these different things, and how that's going to change them. So what kind of transferable skills then, if they have this background in this, context for them, what kind of transferable skills can our Generation Z students acquire at a liberal arts college?
I think they'll acquire a broader approach that they can take to the technology, and vice versa. They can bring their technology to the broader questions, to the bigger questions. They're figuring out how to use the technology that they love to make things go more smoothly, whether it's internally at a business or whether it's a social justice or social problem, whether they're trying to solve water quality issues. How can they bring the technology into that? And that's where the hybrid comes. And I mean, hybrid's a big and sort of loaded word, but what I mean by it is taking their knowledge of how to use smaller platforms or more commonly used platforms to influence and to change the way that people think about what they're trying to accomplish. Again, either from a corporate perspective or from a social justice, social issues perspective. There was, if you look at social movements, sometimes they're driven in ways that we don't expect. And so I think that if you look at even what happened just last weekend with all the marches, I'm not going to get political, I promise. But when you look at all the marches, a lot of it started with one Facebook post, like, we should go march. And ta-da, a little while later, there was just a lot happening. And so I think that Generation Z has the ability to harness their love of technology to do many good things. I think that we, as the generations before, just have to make sure that it doesn't become purely and solely all about the technology.
Right.
Because if you never look up to see what you've accomplished, then you don't get the joy of the accomplishment, but you don't see if it's happening properly either.
And also, I think you make a really good point. It's also important to look at it in context. If you don't take step back from, your technology or your goal or whatever it is that you're involved in, it can give you such a tunnel view. And by being in a situation, a liberal arts context, we're challenging each other and asking each other the hard questions and saying, well, did this get the effect that you want? If not, why not? And what else can you do? And it was interesting because I recently read an article about how campuses are becoming a lot of times very unilateral in their views that are expressed, and making sure that they keep some diversity and discussion going on. But I love the example of one idea can, and especially in our Generation Z, is they're very comfortable with reacting and doing things more spontaneously than probably older generations. So
but if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. You and I, I'm going to guess, are similar in age, and if we wanted to find our friends to go to the movies when we were in high school, I mean, you had to call. First you had to be at your house, then you had to call, and you had to call one and then call the next, or have them call somebody else, and then there was a whole different way of coordinating an activity. Now, I mean, right in this very, next 10 seconds, I could type to 5 people, want to go to the movies? And boom, it's gone on text. And it just is so amazingly different. But what I think we have to remember is that once we get all to the movies, when we all get there, we still need to know how to interact as people. That part, I think, is never going to go away, in my opinion, it should never go away. That ability to be able to interact individually and in small groups and large groups as people in one place.
So how do students take these as they're going through their education and they're learning how to connect their technology to these communication skills, critical thinking skills, those kinds of things? How do they identify what those skills are and then communicate those skills as they enter the job market? So once they finish their education, how does the value of the liberal arts education show itself in that regard as well?
I hope first and foremost, primarily when they're doing their job search, it shows up in that cover letter, and that their writing skills are stronger. They're able to present themselves well in writing and get that foot in the door so that they can have conversation with whomever's hiring, whether it's by Zoom for that first primary interview and then maybe in person later on. I remember interviewing a young potential admission counselor, and it was very exciting because we actually had a conversation. I didn't feel like I had to quiz him about what we might be doing together as colleagues. I really felt like we could have a conversation about bigger issues related to the work. And sometimes, in my opinion, if you're a good interviewer, once you've made it through that cover letter and you have a chance to talk to people, you're not necessarily you don't want them to reiterate the resume. I can read the resume. What you want them to do is be able to flesh it out in ways that get you excited about seeing, oh, well, that's what they did with that activity. For young employees, really getting that first job is going to be a lot about how you can get in the door. And sometimes, from a very practical perspective, I know that families worry that smaller institutions, smaller liberal arts colleges, and by small, I'm just using it in general, like under 5,000, they're worried that there's not the same kind of alumni network. And that, and I think that that's a falsehood. I've been reading lots of pieces because I follow all of the colleges that change live schools. And it's really quite interesting. I just read one last night about a tech firm in San Francisco, run by a St. John's alumnus, and there were two other St. John's alumni interviewed in the article. And part of it is because he understands the quality of the education that they got. It's a tech firm. They do aerial photography, so it's a tech firm at its heart. But what he's looking for is the ability to communicate, the ability to problem solve, the ability to drive the business in a way that might be unexpected. And that's what he's seeing by employing people whose background is bigger and broader than just a technical education. Technical education has value. At least I fully believe that. But I think that for so many students, the joy of learning should not be driven into one area so soon. If they're going to specialize, I encourage them to think about doing that as a grad student, maybe, or maybe just as your lifelong learning, if it's something that you really want to narrow in on, it's something you do. But to have a way to communicate your skills and a way to communicate the joy in what you do, I think that a liberal arts education has great value for that.
Oh, I agree. And Christy made a comment. She says, clarity of writing is often equated with clarity of thought. And, and that does, as you said, that translates over into very identifiable qualities and job qualities. I know in our technology company for Guided Path, one of our first service director of our service and training, her degree is in Italian. But she was perfect because she knew how to teach a language. She had learned a language, and then, a lot of times taking on a new online tool or project is like learning another language. And so she was able to translate that, and it was a great match for a technology company coming with someone who had an Italian degree. And people will ask you, well, what are you going to do with an Italian degree or a degree in history or Greek or something, but those are things that really can be translated. So you touched on something that I want to also ask a little bit about, and that's like doing internships or cooperative education type of things. Do you see more and more schools emphasizing that and providing those opportunities as part of their liberal arts education?
Absolutely. I'm seeing more of it. Internships, externships, co-op programs, short-term and long-term. So some running as short as 2 or 3 weeks during a winter term, or even 1 week over a spring break. And then semester-long programs, summer programs, year-long programs. And what's nice to see also is some schools are combining the internship opportunity with the study abroad opportunity. So it gives the student a chance to do that study abroad and perhaps, meaning this in the most appropriate way, perhaps sell that study abroad experience to the parents by saying, but at the same time, I'm going to do this internship. I know that happened fairly often for students at Eckerd College. Ursinus has just started a program, I don't know if I'll remember the exact name, but it's an externship program in Philadelphia. So they're only maybe 30, 35 miles outside Philly, but students can actually do a semester in Philly where they live in Philadelphia, they take classes, and they do internship work or while they are there. I think the term externship is becoming even more popular. And then Antioch, of course, continues its co-op program, which with their semester on, semester off. And I think that the liberal arts colleges are trying to respond to the public concern that the education is too theoretical, and recognizing that the more that we give students the skill set that they need to become employed in the field they hope to be in, the better that is for everyone. You know, primarily it's great for the student, but it also helps the parent understand return for investment. It helps the idea of paying for a private institution or a public liberal arts school. It helps make paying for it more palatable, more exciting. I don't know if exciting is the right word. My child's only in preschool, so I don't know if I can use exciting when it comes to paying for tuition, although we pay, and so maybe it is exciting. But really feeling like the student is going to get something for what they have. And I think the other thing colleges need to do better, and this is, and I don't know how we do it better as an industry, but I think that we need to remember to talk with students and parents about long-term success. So often we judge a college on whether or not students get a job within the first 6 months, which is important, yes. But if, demographically, they're going to live to be in their 80s, and they're probably going to work at least until their 60s. So success is really the 40 years of working. Well, that's a big word, isn't it? 40 years of working. But the 40 years of working, not just that first year. That's where a lot of times when you look at the salary results, you see the liberal arts college students who are not in the sciences, and that's where often the concern is from a salary perspective. They catch right up in the bulk earning years, and they actually move ahead at the end of their careers, of not end, but say in their mid-50s. They're 50, when they're 50 and on, they really move ahead in their salaries. So understanding that the practical and the theoretical cannot exist separately, because we don't live in that kind of world.
Right.
When you have a job, almost any job is going to ask you to be somewhat philosophical and big picture thinking, and at the same time someone's got to get the work done.
Right, right. And I think that you hit the nail on the head very well, in that looking at the long-term view, and it's not just when you get out of college, what is it going to do for you over the long term, over your lifespan, and how you can contribute. And this generation, there's in our generation, things change. Now we're at lightning speed, light speed of light, and they need to be able to be prepared to manage that and navigate that. So I see that as a very important, valuable aspect. So tell us a little bit, how many people find out a little more about colleges that change lives, and what's your role with, we've mentioned it a couple of times. So tell us about your role and what that is and how they can learn more about it.
So my role as executive director is to speak on behalf of the organization, and our organizational goal is to encourage students, parents, and counselors, and really everybody, to think about the college search as student-centered, to think about this as looking for a short list of colleges and universities that would be a really good fit for a student, a place where they would thrive personally, a place they'll thrive academically, where they'll be challenged and supported, and a place where they can really become their best selves intellectually and personally. Colleges That Change Lives has been working together as a group for about 20 years. We've been a nonprofit organization for 10 years, and we came together because of the book Colleges That Change Lives by Lauren Pope. We have 44 member colleges. They represent 25 different states. 42 are private institutions and 2 are public institutions. They range in size from about 250 students to about 4,000 students. So it's a pretty big range, even within the umbrella of small. To find out more about us, it's really very simple in many ways. Our website is just ctcl.org, and there are articles posted. There's advice for students and families. There's links to the colleges and profiles about short profiles about each of the member institutions. We will do 23 programs across the U.S. 1 week we'll travel in May on the East Coast, and then we will travel 3 weeks in the summer on the West Coast, in the South and Southwest, and in the greater Midwest. All of that information is posted on our website under events, and you can see if we're coming to a program near you. Those programs in 2017 will have somewhere between 40 and 42 of the 44 colleges at each program. We also run a Facebook page where I try to post 3 to 5 pieces a day. On a good day, 3 to 5 pieces, sometimes 1, sometimes 5, but typically 3 to 5 pieces about student successes, alumni successes, faculty and student collaboration, what's happening at the colleges, what's new and exciting, as well as pieces about the liberal arts in general, about higher education, the landscape of higher education, that I think can be helpful to students, parents, and counselors. When I look at the demographics, I think it's likely that our followers are mostly parents and counselors, and that's okay because we understand that they're huge influencers. And then we also everything goes to our Twitter feed, and our Twitter feed is CTCL Colleges, and you can follow us there and see those same articles coming up and get a sense of what's happening with Colleges That Change Lives.
That sounds fabulous. And you have a postcard or something that shows where all your different tours are going to be. Is that correct?
I do. It has gone out to about 4,000 counselors that are in our kind of ongoing database, and then another 16,000 or so high schools. But I have a PDF that I'm happy to forward to you that you can forward out to counselors or CBO leaders who might want to know if we're going to be near them. And they can easily contact me through the website if they have questions about the programs or anything like that. If anybody would like to bring a group of students from their CBO or from their high school, have them be in touch with me. Sometimes we can be helpful on that front. And we're happy to have counselors come to our programs. We're also doing 4 events for counselors this year in conjunction with our tours. We are doing a lunch, we're doing a breakfast in Atlanta, we're doing a breakfast in Denver, a breakfast in another city to be named.
Someplace.
And we're getting brave and bold, and we're going to try a lunch in San Diego. So we are trying to reach out to counselors because we want to be a resource. We have materials that we can supply for schools. As simple as if a school needs pens for a program, I always have a stash of pens in the garage, as well as we have 2 pieces of written material that we can send out for schools' use and counselors' use. And we are toward the very end of translating our pieces into Spanish and Chinese, and those will be available as
fabulous.
PDFs. But they're not quite ready, but we're working on it. So those will be available through our website.
Oh, that'll be fabulous. That'll be very beneficial. So, so make sure those of you who are listening or will be watching this later, mark your websites and go to ctcl.org, and all that information will be there. Now, we have a couple of questions. Are you ready for some questions?
Unless they're hard questions.
Well, Shelley's been doing a good job. So now if you have questions, now is a really good time to post them on your Zoom. There's a section, it says question, and you can post a question here. So Shelley asked about what do you see as the advantage of attending a small liberal arts college versus studying at one of the classic liberal arts majors in the College of Arts and Sciences at a large university? Why not study just at the large university and still do a liberal arts major versus
I think both have value. I think some of it comes down to how well the student moves through a larger institution. Even if they're within a small honors college, for example, at a larger institution, they still need to be able to move themselves through a bigger institution. And I think it just it asks them to do different things. Not better or worse, just different. It just asks them to be able to move through their world differently. I think the liberal arts college is built to take a strong student and make them stronger by getting them connected to faculty very quickly, getting them involved in more enrichment work, maybe research, or having a chance to write a paper with a faculty person. I think the smaller program within a larger institution gives the student that same opportunity, and it gives them the bigger social realm that a lot of students are looking for. So I think that has absolute value. I think that sometimes the assumption from families is the honors college as a state institution will automatically be less expensive. And I think it does work out sometimes, but it doesn't always. And I think that if families are able to expand the list at the beginning a little bit, and I'm not a proponent of a huge list, but to perhaps keep both kinds of institutions on the list at the beginning, I think that they are able to then compare financial aid packages better. Short story, we were doing a program in Phoenix a couple of summers ago, and a mom and a son came up, they were getting ready to go, and they were clearly in a family discussion. And the student kept saying he wanted a big school, but he couldn't articulate why. And the mom kept saying, but why? But why? But why? It was getting very awkward for the rest of us, I have to be very honest. And finally, the way that he put it, and it almost exploded out of him, he said, I need more possibilities. And I think that was really an interesting way to put it. He needed more possibilities. On the flip side, even a small college is probably going to have 40 majors. And, 1,100 students. Our group as a whole averages about 1,175 students as a whole group per college. And we as human creatures, we create small community. So even at a really large institution, they're probably going to have 10 people that they're willing to text at 2 o'clock in the morning for help. So it is kind of an interesting conundrum. It's a great question. And I think that both experiences have value. I do think that there's some very smart administrators at large institutions who said, how can we replicate this really great experience and still give our students the big social experience? And so I think that was a very smart thing for them to do.
Yeah, I agree, totally. And it goes back to, the students, their style. I often talk to my students about what's your style as a learner. Are you a participant learner? Are you an observant learner? And the kind of campus that's going to be appropriate for you, whether it's a liberal arts major or not, has a big influence on that. And so that's all that self-reflection that students need to go through, and their families, because as you illustrated, it's a family process. And so it's not just the students going through this, the parents are going through that with them just as much. So it really is much more of a family affair. So Shelley also asked if you have a go-to resource for parents who are nervous about their STEM-oriented students studying math and science at a liberal arts school. So she said she found an article a few years ago written by a large university science professor praising the grad school preparation provided by LACs in the sciences.
It's more a question of a series of articles, to be very honest, because I see so many pieces. Again, I read about the 44 colleges every day, and I see so many pieces where the the strength of science and math at this type of institution is reinforced. There was a great piece that I posted on our website. It's been a few months, I have to admit, but it was about Earlham College students going out for internships in Indianapolis. And this one particular tech firm, or STEM firm in Indianapolis, is always so excited when they get another Earlham intern, because they all know lab procedures that many of their graduate student interns don't know, because they've been able to do so much more hands-on right away. So I'll be fair, I do not have one particular resource, but if you are a Facebook person or a Twitter person and you're willing to follow along on our feed, you'll see that there's a good amount that comes up about science, about how students are succeeding in the sciences. There was an excellent piece by a professor at Rhodes not that long ago, certainly within the past few months, talking about how science students really do succeed well at the small schools because of the earlier and more frequent opportunities to get involved in research. I think from my perspective and what I have read and heard, and I have to say it's not personal because I went to a small school, but often at the larger research universities, the question of an undergrad becoming involved in a research project of depth and really being able to do something involved and deep is harder. It's harder unless you're really stellar. And I think that the liberal arts colleges, the faculty are there because they love to teach, and they are always willing to kind of pull many people into that opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree. So this leads into Eileen's question. She says she understands that as great as 3-2 programs for engineers sound, very few students actually complete that program after being at a liberal arts school for 3 years. Is there truth to that? And what are your thoughts about pluses or minuses of a 3-2 engineering program?
I love talking about 3-2 engineering with kids who are interested in engineering, because they're so skeptical, and then they're almost excited, and then they're kind of, wait a minute, I think you tricked me. So it's really kind of fun. I think that one of the best experiences I had when it came to 3-2 engineering is I was doing a program in Palos Verdes, California, and the question came from a parent about 3-2 programs, and a woman raised her hand at the back of the room and said, I recruit engineers. That's what I do for a living, she said, and 3-2 engineering programs prepare them very, very well. In my experience, working at 2 institutions, Clark University and Eckerd College, and kind of watching the pattern through other institutions, students like the idea of 3-2. Not many students do follow through. You're correct. What happens a lot of times is they become connected emotionally and intellectually at their first campus, and they don't really want to leave. Many of the campuses who do 3-2 are very careful about making sure that students have an experience of some type in the first year that really exposes them to what engineering will actually be, and that sometimes that educational piece, because it's so important, really will push students in the direction they need to be, which might not be engineering. I think that from a recruiter perspective, as a college rep, they're hard to sell, because we're asking engineering students who tend to be very focused on science and math to recognize that they'll have to do the other stuff. They'll have to do the humanities and the social sciences. But what you often see that is important in my mind is that those engineers who hope someday to move into management often return to school for an MBA. They don't as often return for an engineering master's degree unless they want to continue as a working engineer. But when they're looking at going into management, they're looking for some of the skill set that they didn't get in a traditional engineering program sometimes.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. And again, it goes back to the earlier conversation, is looking at the short term versus the long term, and over the life of their over their lifetime and employment, having those other skills are going to come into play very much later on. So what about this? So Sabra asked about, is the admission competitiveness a bit less at a CTCL college in general, or is it just particular college to college?
It's particular college to college. It is definitely particular college to college. There's a range of admissibility at the schools. The last time I ran an average admit rate for all of the institutions in our organization, it was 64%, so it was pretty much average for the national four-year college admission rate. Last time I looked, they range from probably about probably the most selective is about 30%, and the least selective would or most inclusive, I prefer to put it that way, runs about 75%. The nice part is even the institutions that are at the more selective end, I do believe that they are still very, very thoughtful in their admission process. I don't think that they are in a position where they are just carte blanche saying, oh, well, yeah, number doesn't work, number doesn't work. I do feel like there are admission reps who are taking the time to get to know each individual student, and if they really do see the potential, give them a chance to succeed at that institution. Admission reps do try to be really thoughtful, though. We want to make sure that the students we admit are going to be successful at our institutions.
Yeah, and as we've talked to and other admissions people, and you and I have spoken too, it's a two-way match. You know, students want to be a good match for the college, but the college wants to be a good match and find students that are a good match for them too.
Absolutely.
So it really is that conversation. So one last question, and then we're going to close for today. And are there, Vince asked if there are college tours. The CTL hosts a CTL college tour where people can come and visit different CTL colleges.
For counselors?
Find out about that, yeah, for counselors.
The individual schools do some fly-ins of their own and then work with other groups, like Beloit is part of the COWS tour, and I know Clark has a fly-in for counselors. Eckerd was part of the Sunshine Tour. I believe they still are. When I first went down to Eckerd, I tried to figure out how we could do a counselor tour for the schools in kind of the southeast quadrant of the country, and we couldn't quite figure out the way that we would move people from point A to point B without making it too hard on counselors. So I don't know of any tours that are specific to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 CTCL schools together. But I believe that among all of the 44, that there's probably a fly-in program for all of them, or at least a visit program of some type for counselors. If someone is specifically interested, they can email me. If you want, for example, to be better connected to the CTCL colleges, you can always email me, and I send that out to the 44 colleges, to my contacts, and I say, this counselor or this CBO would love to have a visit, or they're doing a college fair and would like to have more CTCL participation, or they're hoping that they could be invited on a tour to your campus. If you want to get that information to me, your contact information, then you don't have to go through and try to contact all the schools.
That's perfect. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And to be able to do it, because they are spread out and so far nationally, it would be hard to have one that's together. But to have many that have their own fly-ins or be part of these other tours is something that people can, it gives them an opportunity to contact you or contact the college and start asking those questions. So
absolutely. I did have a counselor once, I did have a counselor once propose it was like a 1-month all CTCL bus tour for counselors. And she thought that you could start at one corner of the country, kind of work your way in this big loop and end up in the back. And I really sat down with a map one day and I said, oh my goodness, wow, wow.
That would be fun.
Pretty creative, you know?
I mean, we have people who do the bike tours of colleges every year, so they hop on a bike and travel hundreds of miles. So, anyway, well, thank you very much for your time. I know we have a lot of other questions. Those of you whose questions we were not able to get to, we will take them, write them down, and we'll send them to you, Maria. And any that I can answer or that we can answer through Guided Path, we'll be able to answer. And just a reminder for everyone, join us. Our next interview is going to be with author Joyce Vining Morgan. We're going to talk about students and how do you work with students or guide students who are undecided. And I think that's another area liberal arts is very supportive of. Students don't have to know what they want to do when they go to college, and they have the opportunity to explore that once they get to college. So that'll be February 22nd. We'll be interviewing Joyce. She is one of the co-authors for Admission Matters. And look for Maria events in your areas and check out the website, and we'll be sending you the postcard as well. And I know we'll have lots of you that are joining us at a later time. You can always go to the website and go to guidedpath.net, and you'll see the list of all the interviews that we're doing this year to talk about subjects of paths to higher education and all the different paths that our students can take. So we'll be interviewing lots of interesting and thought-provoking subject matter experts. So Maria, anything else that you'd like to share before we close today?
No, other than I'd like to thank the counselors who are out there every day working with students and parents. We really do recognize from an admission office perspective that you guys take the brunt of the work. We appreciate very much what you do on a daily basis.
So thank you everyone. Thank you. And this concludes our interview for today.